Okay, so we're about to dive into a story, a real puzzle, from one of the most isolated places you can imagine. And this one, it kind of turns everything we think we know about myth, about memory, and even about the dawn of civilization right on its head. So yeah, let's get into it. All right, so this is the big question, the core mystery we're looking at. And listen, this isn't about finding kind of similar ideas, like a great flood story or a sky god. We see those everywhere. No, we're talking about the same very specific story, like a narrative fingerprint, beat for beat, showing up in two cultures that were completely, totally cut off from each other for 50,000 years. I mean, how on earth is that even possible? So, you might be asking, why is this such a big deal? Well, normally, when scholars find the same myth in different places, they have two go-to explanations. It's almost always one or the other. But this case, the one from Australia, it doesn't just bend the rules. It seems to break them both. Okay, so here are the two big theories. First, you've got cultural diffusion. Sounds fancy, but it just means stories spread. People trade, they migrate, they talk, and their stories travel with them. Makes sense, right? Then you have the other idea from Carl Jung called the collective unconscious. This one says we all share a basic human psychological toolkit, so we independently invent similar stories and archetypes without ever meeting. And you know what? For pretty much every parallel myth you can find, one of those two explanations fits perfectly. Except for this one.
All right, so let's introduce the first piece of this incredible puzzle. We're heading to northwestern Australia, to the Kimberley region. Here, for tens of thousands of years, the Aboriginal peoples have passed down a sacred oral tradition. And not just that, they have ancient, breathtaking rock art depicting these beings they call the Wandjina.
Now, I really need you to pay attention to the sequence of events here. This isn't some vague creation story. It's a very specific four-act play. Act 1, beings come down from the sky, from the Milky Way. Act 2, they create the world as we know it and teach humanity the rules. Act 3, they disappear, specifically by entering water holes. And Act 4, they're still there, underground, powerful, but out of reach. Remember that sequence. It's everything. And the paintings, wow, they're just as specific and just as strange. I mean, look at them. These are not human figures. The tradition actually says the Wandjina painted their own portraits on the rocks before they left. They have these stark white faces, even though the artists were black-skinned people. They have these huge black eyes with no mouth, and they're surrounded by what looks like a halo or some kind of helmet. The people who've guarded these stories for millennia are absolutely clear on one thing. These beings weren't human, they were from somewhere else entirely.
Okay, now hold that thought. We're going to jump halfway across the planet. We're going to the ancient Near East, and we're looking at a text that's, well, it's pretty controversial. It's called the Book of Enoch. And in it, we find a story about a group of heavenly beings called the Watchers. And believe me, this is where that strange echo we heard in Australia becomes a deafening roar.
Just look at this, side by side. It's uncanny. The Wandjina descend from the sky, the Watchers descend from the heavens. The Wandjina teach humanity laws, the Watchers teach humanity arts and sciences. The Wandjina enter the earth through water holes, the Watchers are imprisoned beneath the earth. Both remain underground, present but inaccessible. Now, yeah, the why is different. For the Wandjina, it's just what they did. For the Watchers, it's a punishment. But the what, the actual sequence of events, it's identical. This isn't a shared theme, it's the same plot. Okay, so the first thing your logical brain is probably screaming is, well, the story must have traveled, right? Somebody must have told somebody. There had to be contact. And this is where Australia becomes the ultimate test case. It's like a perfect sealed laboratory for history.
Think about this. The first people arrived in Australia at least 50,000 years ago. And once the sea levels rose after the Ice Age, that was it. They were cut off completely. For millennia, there were no trading ships from Mesopotamia, no lost tribes of Israel wandering through the outback. Zero contact with the cultures that produced the Book of Enoch until the 1700s. Let that number sink in. 50,000 years.
And to really get how insane this is, let's use China as a sort of control group. Ancient China, before the Silk Road opened up, was also incredibly isolated from the West. And guess what? They also have a similar story about their three sovereigns who came down and taught humanity everything. So China's already a pretty strong case for this weird shared story. But Australia is just in a league of its own.
And here's why. See, with China, a determined skeptic could maybe try to argue for some tiny, undocumented, long-shot contact. It's unlikely, but you could try to make the case. With Australia, you can't. It's a non-starter. No serious historian or archaeologist even tries, because there is just no plausible way it could have happened. The isolation wasn't just deep, it was absolute.
Okay. So if the story couldn't travel to Australia, maybe it's not that old. Maybe the Aboriginal story is much more recent and the similarities are just a fluke. I mean, how can we possibly trust an oral story to be accurate for that long? Well, what if I told you we could actually test it, scientifically?
This quote really just says it all. The idea is simple. If a people's stories can accurately describe a real-world geological event that happened 10,000 years ago, well, then maybe we should take their other stories seriously too.
And guess what? That's exactly what happened. In Queensland, there are these old Aboriginal stories about the land catching fire, the ground shaking, and giant pits forming. They were describing the creation of volcanic crater lakes. So geologists went in and they dated those volcanic events. The result? Over 10,000 years ago. But here's the kicker. The stories also describe the forest that was there at that time, and by taking pollen samples from the bottom of the lakes, scientists confirmed it. The story was right. It was a eucalyptus forest back then, not the rainforest you see today. That's hard, scientific proof that this oral tradition can preserve a factual memory for more than 10,000 years. 400 generations.
All right, let's lay out the facts one more time. We have the same, highly detailed story in two different parts of the world. And these two places are separated by an ocean and, more importantly, by 50,000 years of isolation. So, what's the explanation?
First option, sheer coincidence. But really? Remember the sequence? They come down, they teach, they go into the earth, and they stay there. That's a lot of very specific details to line up by pure chance. It just feels incredibly unlikely. It's not a satisfying answer.
Second option. The story traveled. Cultural diffusion. We've already been over this. It's impossible. Australia's 50,000-year isolation is the brick wall that this theory runs into. So we can just take that one right off the table.
So, what does that leave us with? If it's not coincidence, and it's not cultural spread, there's really only one other possibility on the table. This isn't just a psychological quirk, a collective unconscious thing. This is the signature of a shared memory. The argument is that these stories are so similar because they aren't two different stories at all. They're two different fragmented versions of the same story, remembering a single real event from so long ago that it happened before humans spread out across the world.
And that, of course, leads to the one final massive question, a question you can't really avoid. The Aboriginal tradition, which we've seen can be factually accurate for over 10,000 years, tells us about beings from the sky who went underground. The ancient book of Enoch tells of beings from heaven who were imprisoned under the earth. If these aren't just myths, if they are in fact distant broken memories of our own deep history, then what in the world are we all remembering?